Chapter 2. The Collection of the Dead Ryazan, Russian Empire, April to June, 1887. Dr. Ivan Gromov's medical journal, dated April 12, 1887, contains an entry that would be suppressed by authorities for decades. I have spent the past 6 weeks verifying Maria Vorontsova's claims against parish records, cemetery registries, and surviving witnesses. The results defy every principle of rational medicine I have ever learned. The child has described in perfect, horrifying detail the deaths of 37 individuals. All died between 1837 and 1857, decades before her birth. She knows their names, the dates of their deaths, the rooms where they expired, the faces of those who attended them in their final moments. She describes symptoms I have never told her about, medical complications she should not understand, last words spoken that were never recorded in any document. Yesterday I visited Anna Sergeyevna Dmitrieva, now 63 years old. She is the daughter of Ekaterina Andreevna, the first death Maria described. When I recounted what Maria had said about her mother's final hours, Anna wept. No one could know these things, she told me. My mother died when I was 3 days old. My family never spoke of the details. They wanted to spare me the pain, but everything your patient said is true. Everything. I have checked 23 other cases. Church records confirm the dates. Surviving family members confirm the details. There is no rational explanation. But what troubles me more than the impossible accuracy of Maria's memories is what has begun happening to the child herself. The transformation started slowly. For the first 2 weeks after her resurrection, Maria seemed almost normal. She ate, she slept, she played with her dolls as any 7-year-old might. But Elizaveta noticed the silences, long periods when her daughter would sit motionless by the window, staring at nothing, lips moving soundlessly as if in conversation with invisible companions. "Mama, why are they always crying?" Maria asked one evening in mid-April, her voice carrying that same unsettling flatness that had appeared after her death and return. "Who is crying, my love?" "All of them, the ones who want me to remember. They're so sad. They don't understand why no one else can see them." Elizaveta's hand trembled as she stroked her daughter's hair. "Perhaps you should try not to listen to them, sweet one. Perhaps if you ignore them, they'll go away." Maria turned to look at her mother, and Elizaveta would later tell Dr. Gromov that in that moment she did not recognize her own child. The eyes were Maria's eyes, brown and wide and fringed with long lashes. But what looked out through them was something older, sadder, infinitely more weary. "They won't go away, Mama, they can't. They're trapped between death and forgetting, and I'm the only one who can hear them, the only one who can remember." She paused. "If I don't remember them, it's like they died twice. Do you understand?" Elizaveta did not understand, but she nodded anyway because what else could a mother do? On April 23rd, Maria experienced the first episode. Dr. Gromov had come to the Vorontsova house for his weekly examination. Maria sat in the parlor, a book open in her lap, though Gromov noticed she wasn't actually reading, just staring at the same page for long minutes. "Tell me how you've been feeling this week, Maria," Gromov said gently, settling into the chair across from her. "I remembered another one yesterday," she replied without looking up from her book. "A man named Pyotr Ivanovich Sokolov. He drowned in the Oka River on August 3rd, 1848. He was trying to save his son, who had fallen through the ice during an early freeze." Gromov felt the familiar chill he'd come to associate with these sessions. "Did he save the boy?" "No, they both drowned. Pyotr went under first. The water was so cold it felt like knives. He couldn't breathe. He tried to reach the surface, but he couldn't find it. Everything was dark, and the current pulled him down, and his lungs burned, and—" Maria stopped mid-sentence. Her eyes, which had been fixed on the book, went suddenly wide. Her breathing accelerated. "Maria, what's wrong?" The child's hands flew to her throat. She gasped, mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. Her face began to turn red, then purple. "Maria!" Gromov leaped from his chair, but before he could reach her, Elizaveta was already there, grabbing her daughter's shoulders. Maria thrashed in her mother's arms, still gasping, her eyes rolling back. Gromov could hear her trying to speak, but only choking sounds emerged. Her small body convulsed as if fighting against invisible restraints. "She's drowning," Gromov said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "She's experiencing Pyotr's death. She's feeling what he felt." For 43 seconds, Gromov timed it on his pocket watch. Maria Vorontsova drowned on dry land. Then, as suddenly as it began, the episode ended. She drew a deep, shuddering breath and collapsed against her mother, sobbing. "I couldn't breathe," she gasped between sobs. "The water, so cold. I couldn't find the surface. I was dying." "You're safe," Elizaveta whispered, rocking her daughter. "You're here. You're breathing. You're safe." But Maria shook her head violently. "No, he wasn't safe. Pyotr wasn't safe. His son wasn't safe. They died, Mama. They died, and I felt it. I felt everything." Gromov's hands shook as he wrote in his journal that evening, "The child is not simply remembering the dead. She is experiencing their deaths. The physical trauma, the pain, the terror, it all manifests in her body as if she herself is dying. If this continues, if she remembers enough deaths in enough detail, I fear what it might do to her." But Maria couldn't stop. Over the following weeks, she described death after death, each memory arriving unbidden like waves breaking against a shore. And with each new death, she physically manifested the cause. On May 2nd, she remembered Anna Petrovna Volkova, who died of tuberculosis in 1852. Maria coughed blood for 6 hours, her handkerchief stained crimson, though Dr. Gromov's examination showed her lungs were perfectly healthy. On May 15th, she remembered Mikhail Dmitrievich Krasov, stabbed to death in a tavern brawl in 1847. Maria screamed and clutched her side, describing the sensation of a blade entering her flesh. When Gromov examined her, there was no wound, but her dress was wet with blood that had seeped through from seemingly nowhere, only to vanish within an hour. On May 28th, she remembered Elena Igorevna Serova, who died in childbirth in 1841. Maria, a 7-year-old virgin child, experienced labor pains so severe that she screamed until her voice broke. The episode lasted 4 hours, the exact duration of Elena's fatal labor. "This cannot continue," Dmitri told Dr. Gromov after that incident, his face gray with exhaustion and fear. "My daughter is dying. Slowly, piece by piece, she is dying. Each death she remembers takes something from her." And it was true. Maria had lost weight. Dark circles had appeared under her eyes. Her skin had taken on a waxy pallor. She moved like someone decades older, her small body bent under invisible weight. "I've spoken with colleagues in Moscow and St. Petersburg," Gromov admitted. "None have encountered anything similar. The medical literature offers no guidance. I don't know how to help her." "Then what do we do?" Elizaveta's voice cracked. "Do we just watch her fade away?" Before Gromov could answer, a scream erupted from upstairs. They ran to Maria's room and found her sitting bolt upright in bed, eyes wide and unseeing, speaking in a voice that was not her own, older, masculine, rough, with peasant dialect. "Don't understand. The horse reared and the cart, oh God, the cart is tipping and I can't. The wheel, it's crushing my chest. I can't breathe. I can't. Someone help me, please. I have children. I have a wife. Please don't let me die alone in the..." The voice cut off. Maria blinked, focusing on her parents and Dr. Gromov standing in the doorway. "Ivan Pavlovich Morozov," she said in her own child's voice, though it carried that terrible flatness. Crushed by his own cart when the wheel broke on Tverskaya Street, June 2nd, 1849. He died slowly. It took almost an hour. He was conscious the whole time. She lay back down, closing her eyes. I'm tired now, so tired. Do you think when I die I'll have to remember my own death too? Will I be trapped just like them, waiting for someone else to remember me? No one answered, because no one knew. By mid-June, Dr. Gromov had documented 43 deaths that Maria had remembered. He'd verified 38 of them through parish records and witness testimony. The remaining 5 predated reliable documentation, but local elderly residents confirmed the basic facts. More disturbing was the pattern he'd begun to notice. The deaths cluster around specific dates, he wrote in his journal on June 18th. Maria remembers people who died between January and September, spanning 1837 to 1857. Always within that 20-year window, always within those 9 months, but never anyone who died in October, November, or December of any year, and never anyone who died before 1837 or after 1857. Why? What significance do these dates hold? What determines which dead Maria can hear and which remains silent? He would not discover the answer until it was too late. On June 22nd, Father Constantine from the Orthodox Cathedral requested a meeting with the Vorontsova family. A stern man in his 60s, he arrived at the house with 2 younger priests and an icon of Saint Michael the Archangel. I have heard troubling reports about your daughter, Father Constantine said, refusing the offered seat. They say she communes with the dead, that she speaks in tongues and manifests wounds that have no earthly cause. These are signs of demonic possession, not divine gift. My daughter is not possessed, Dmitri said coldly. She's ill. Dr. Gromov is treating her. Dr. Gromov is a man of science, not faith. He cannot combat the forces of darkness. Father Constantine produced a small vial of holy water. I must perform the rite of exorcism, for the child's sake, for the sake of her immortal soul. Absolutely not. Elizaveta stepped between the priest and the stairs leading to Maria's room. You will not touch my daughter. The Church has authority in matters of spiritual warfare. This is my house. Dmitri's voice carried steel. And I say no. Leave. Now. Father Constantine's face darkened. You are making a grave mistake, Dmitri Alexeyevich. The girl has opened a door that should remain closed. What comes through such doors does not simply go away when ignored. It spreads. It infects. It destroys. He moved toward the door, then paused. I will pray for your family. But know this. When the darkness claims your daughter, and it will, you will have no one to blame but yourselves. After the priests departed, Gromov found Maria standing at the top of the stairs. She had heard everything. He's right, you know, she said quietly. Father Constantine, I did open a door. When I died and came back, something broke. Now they can all reach me, all the ones who died with words unspoken, with memories unshared, with truths untold. They crowd around me, begging me to remember, to bear witness, to prove they existed. She descended the stairs slowly, one hand trailing along the banister. But he's wrong about one thing. It's not darkness that came through, it's just sadness. The overwhelming, crushing sadness of being forgotten, of dying alone with no one to remember. That's what they want. Not to harm me, but to be remembered. To matter, even in death. She reached the bottom step and looked up at the adults staring at her. The problem is, I'm only 7 years old, and there are so many of them. Too many. I can't hold them all. I'm not big enough. Gromov knelt beside her. Maria, listen to me. You don't have to do this. You can say no. You can refuse to listen. Can I? She tilted her head and in her eyes he saw that infinite weariness. Can you stop hearing when someone screams? Can you ignore someone drowning right in front of you? They're screaming, Dr. Gromov, all of them, and I'm the only one who can hear. That night, Gromov wrote, I have made a terrible mistake. I encouraged Maria to speak of the dead, to document their deaths, to prove the reality of what she experienced. I treated her as a medical curiosity, a case study, a puzzle to be solved. I forgot she was a child. And now that child is drowning, not in the Oka River like Pyotr Sokolov, but in an ocean of other people's deaths, and I don't know how to save her. From the diary of Elizaveta Vorontsova, June 29, 1887. My daughter barely sleeps anymore. When she does, she wakes screaming, describing deaths in her dreams. She eats less each day. Her hands shake constantly. This morning I found her standing in front of the mirror, staring at her own reflection. Mama, she said without turning around, when I look at myself, I don't know which face is mine anymore. Mine or theirs or the ones who are waiting to die. We all look the same in the end, don't we? Just faces that someone will forget. She is 7 years old. She should be playing with dolls, learning piano, giggling with her sisters. Instead, she stands before mirrors and philosophizes about death like an old woman who has lived too long. Tonight I heard her praying, not the prayers we taught her, but something else. I remember you, Ekaterina Andreevna. I remember you, Pyotr Ivanovich. I remember you, Anna Petrovna. I remember. I will not let you be forgotten, I promise. I remember. Over and over, like a litany, like penance. My daughter is becoming a living memorial to the dead, and I don't know how to bring her back to the living. Chapter 1. Awakening After the Fever. Ryazan, Russian Empire, March 15, 1887. This photograph was taken on March 28, 1887, 13 days after 7-year-old Maria Vorontsova returned from the dead. Look closely at the formal portrait, the merchant Vorontsov family seated in their parlor on Semyonovskaya Street, and you will notice something profoundly disturbing. While her parents and 3 older siblings stare at the camera with rigid Victorian formality, Maria's gaze is fixed elsewhere, not on the photographer, not on some distant point in the room, but on empty space just beyond the frame. Her small hands press flat against her chest, as if holding something inside, and her expression carries a weight no child should bear. Not grief exactly, but the exhausted sorrow of someone who has witnessed far too many endings. When Dr. Ivan Petrovich Gromov first saw this photograph 6 weeks after it was taken, he would write in his medical journal, "I know the look of someone who has glimpsed beyond death's curtain. This child has that look, but she did not merely glimpse, she walked through, and something followed her back." But to understand what Maria Vorontsova became, we must return to the winter when scarlet fever swept through Ryazan like the angel of death himself, claiming half the city's children. The killing season began with snow. By January 1887, ice covered the Oka River 3 feet deep, and the temperature rarely rose above -20, nothing unusual for the Russian heartland. But that year's cold carried disease with it, scarlet fever spreading house by house through the textile workers' district, then creeping into the merchant quarter until even the nobility's children sickened and died. Dr. Ivan Petrovich Gromov, senior Zemstvo physician, kept detailed records of every case. His journals, preserved in the Ryazan State Archive, provide our only documentation of what became known as the Vorontsov case, though even he struggled to explain what he witnessed. On February 28th, he was summoned to the home of Dmitry Vorontsov, a grain merchant whose trading house supplied 3 provinces. The youngest daughter had fallen ill. Gromov found the household in chaos. Elizaveta Mikhailovna wept in the parlor. Dmitri paced like a caged wolf. The three older children had been sent away. When Gromov entered Maria's second-floor bedroom, he knew immediately. The child was dying. Her fever burned dangerously high. The telltale scarlet rash covered her skin, but beneath it, her flesh had turned the gray-white color of old wax. Each breath rattled in her chest. Her pulse flickered, weak and rapid, but her eyes remained disturbingly alert, watching everything with unnatural intensity. "Since this morning," Elizaveta told him, voice breaking, "Dr. Yevdokimov said we should prepare ourselves." Gromov examined the inflamed throat, swollen lymph nodes, the rash spreading across her small body. By every medical indicator, death would come within hours. He prescribed morphine for comfort and told the parents to summon him if anything changed. He did not expect Maria Vorontsova to see another dawn, but at 3 o'clock the next morning something impossible happened. Maria's breathing stopped. Elizaveta, keeping vigil by the bedside, felt for her daughter's pulse. Nothing. She pressed her ear to the child's chest. Silence. Maria's lips turned blue, her skin taking on that unmistakable waxy quality. Father Vasily from the Church of the Presentation arrived at 3:20 to administer last rites. He found Dmitri kneeling beside the bed, weeping. Elizaveta sat frozen by the window. "I performed the prayers for the departed," Father Vasily recorded in his parish journal. "The child showed no signs of life. I placed my prayer book upon her chest to begin the ritual. It did not move with breath. I remember thinking death had been merciful, taking her gently." The funeral prayers concluded at 3:35 a.m. A servant was dispatched to wake the undertaker. Another went to inform Dr. Gromov of the child's passing. Then, at 3:41 a.m., exactly 4 minutes after the priest finished his prayers, Maria Vorontsova's eyes opened. Not slowly, Father Vasily wrote, his handwriting betraying his shaking hand. All at once, like someone pulling aside a curtain, and when she looked at me, I stepped backward until my back pressed against the wall. It was not a child's gaze. It was the look of someone who had seen what mortals are forbidden to see. Maria drew a deep, shuddering breath, her first in more than 4 minutes. Color returned to her lips. Her hand moved, touching her own face, as if checking her solidity. "Mama?" Her voice was raw, damaged. "Where is she? The woman who was sitting here?" Elizaveta rushed to her daughter's side. "What woman, my darling? There's no one here but us and Father Vasily." Maria's gaze swept the room with that same eerie awareness. "She was here, just now, sitting beside the bed, crying. Her name was Ekaterina Andreevna." She paused. "She showed me how she died." The room fell into absolute silence. "How do you know that name?" Dmitri's whisper barely carried across the room. "She told me. She showed me everything." Maria's voice carried no childish uncertainty, only a flat, terrible certainty. The pain, the fear. January 17th, 1843, a Tuesday. Snow on Father Mikhail's shoulders when he came to give her last rites. The yellow curtains, the wooden icon of the Virgin above her bed, how the candles cast shadows when they burned low. She wanted to hold her baby one more time before she died, but they wouldn't let her. Elizaveta made a wounded sound. "Ekaterina was my mother's sister. She died 44 years ago, 3 days after giving birth. Maria was born 7 years ago. She could not possibly know." "She told me," Maria interrupted, "just like the others are telling me now. They're all around us. Do you want to know who they are?" Dr. Gromov was awakened by frantic pounding at 4:15 in the morning. The Vorontsov servant stood breathless on his doorstep. "The young lady, she's alive, doctor, she came back." Gromov dressed hurriedly, his mind racing through medical possibilities. Catalepsy, a death-like coma induced by certain fevers. He had read case studies, though never witnessed one himself. When he arrived, he found Maria sitting up in bed. Sipping water her mother held to her lips. Father Vasily stood by the window, prayer book clutched in trembling hands, his face colorless as milk. Gromov checked her pulse, strong and regular, listened to her heart, steady. Her fever had broken, temperature barely above normal. The throat inflammation had markedly decreased. "Medically impossible," he muttered. "Last night you were hours from death. Your organs were failing, and now I'm better." Maria's voice carried unsettling calm. "I went away, then I came back." "Where did you go? What do you remember?" She tilted her head, studying him with those two knowing eyes. "I don't remember the going, like falling asleep. But then I was somewhere else. Dark, but not frightening. More like waiting. Like being in a room with the lamps out, knowing they'll be lit soon." She paused, choosing words with disturbing precision. Then she appeared. Ekaterina Andreevna, young, maybe 25. Long, dark hair, an old-fashioned dress, the kind Mama says people wore when she was a girl. She was crying. She kept saying she didn't want to die, that her baby needed her. Elizaveta's hand found her husband's. "Maria," Gromov asked carefully, "who is Ekaterina Andreevna?" "My wife's aunt," Dmitri answered hollowly. "Died 44 years before Maria was born. There's no way she could know about Ekaterina." "Childbed fever," Elizaveta whispered. 3 days after her daughter was born. She begged to see the baby one last time, but the midwife refused. Said the child might catch the fever, so Ekaterina died without ever holding her daughter again. "She showed me everything," Maria said, tears now sliding down her pale cheeks. The pain, the terror, the moment she died. Father Mikhail had a scar on his right hand from a childhood accident with an axe. Father Vasily, who had been silent, spoke. Father Mikhail served this parish from 1830 until his death in 1855. He did have such a scar. But Maria, you could not know this. She told me, just like the others are telling me. The child's gaze swept the room, as if seeing people invisible to everyone else. "They're here now, so many of them. They've been waiting for someone who could hear them, someone who crossed over and came back." Maria looked directly at Dr. Gromov. "They want me to remember their deaths. Every detail, every moment. They say I'm the only one who can." In his journal that night, Dr. Ivan Petrovich Gromov wrote, "I have spent my career as a physician building a rational understanding of the human body and mind. Everything I have learned tells me what I witnessed tonight is impossible. A child cannot die for 4 minutes and return. A 7-year-old cannot know intimate details of deaths that occurred decades before her birth. And yet Maria Vorontsova sat before me, alive and speaking of the dead with perfect clarity. I asked her what else she remembered. 'God help me,' I asked, and she told me about 11 other people, their names, how they died, when, where, specific details that could not be fabricated or guessed. Tomorrow I will begin verifying her claims through church records and parish registries. I already know what I will find, that every word she spoke is true. I do not know what came back with Maria Vorontsova when she returned from death, but I know with absolute certainty that the child who died 4 minutes after 3 o'clock this morning was not the same child who opened her eyes at 3:41. Something has changed, something has broken, and I fear we will all pay the price for whatever door Maria has opened between the living and the dead." Chapter 3. The Photograph of the Dead Ryazan, Russian Empire, July 1887. On July 3, 1887, a man arrived in Ryazan carrying equipment that would change everything. Alexander Petrovich Sokolov was 32 years old, a photographer from Moscow who specialized in what he called scientific documentation. He had photographed criminals for police records, documented medical anomalies for the Imperial Academy of Sciences, and once spent 3 weeks in Siberia, photographing the effects of frostbite on prisoners. He was a man who believed that the camera could reveal truths invisible to the human eye. Dr. Gromov had written to him in mid-June, describing Maria's case in careful clinical language. He mentioned nothing of ghosts or supernatural phenomena, only that he had a young patient displaying unusual psychological symptoms following a near-death experience, and he wished to have the case photographed for medical documentation. Sokolov's reply had been brief. I arrived July 3rd. Prepare the subject. Now he stood in the Vorontsov parlor, unpacking glass plates and adjusting his camera, a large brass-fitted apparatus that required a full minute of exposure to capture an image. Maria sat in the chair designated for her, wearing her best dress, her hair freshly braided by her mother. But the child who sat for the portrait was not the same girl who had fallen ill 4 months earlier. Maria had lost nearly a third of her body weight. Her face had become gaunt, the bones prominent beneath waxen skin. Dark circles ringed her eyes, eyes that had developed a distant, unfocused quality, as if she were perpetually looking at something just beyond the visible world. Her hands, folded in her lap, trembled constantly. She looks like a consumptive, Sokolov remarked to Dr. Gromov in a low voice, adjusting his camera's focal length. How long has she been ill? She's not consumptive, Gromov replied. The illness is different. Sokolov grunted, unconvinced, and returned to his preparations. I'll need everyone to leave the room except the subject. Movement during exposure will ruin the image. Elizaveta hesitated at the doorway. Will it take long? 1 minute for the exposure, perhaps 30 minutes total. Your daughter will be perfectly safe, madam. After the family departed, Sokolov positioned Maria precisely in the frame, centered with her hands visible, the background arranged to show the ornate furniture and icons that marked the Vorontsovs as a family of means and piety. Look directly at the camera, child, Sokolov instructed, ducking beneath the black cloth to check his composition. I can't, Maria said softly. Sokolov emerged from beneath the cloth, frowning. It's quite simple. Look at the lens. I can't. Her voice carried that terrible flatness. They're standing between us. If I look at the camera, I'll have to look through them, and that feels disrespectful. The photographer glanced around the empty room, then back at Maria. Who is standing between us? The ones who want to be remembered. There are 6 of them right now. More keep arriving. She paused. One of them is your sister, Vera Petrovna. She died when you were 12. Diphtheria. You weren't allowed to see her before she died because your parents feared you'd catch it. You've felt guilty about that ever since. Sokolov's face went white. He took 2 steps backward, nearly knocking over his tripod. How do you know my sister's name? She told me, just now. She wants you to know that she understood, that she wasn't angry you didn't come. She was afraid you'd catch it too. She thought about you at the end. She wanted to tell you goodbye. The photographer stood frozen, staring at the small girl in the chair. Then, without a word, he disappeared beneath the black cloth and began the exposure. The minute passed in absolute silence. Sokolov developed the plates that evening in a dark room he'd set up in a storage room of the Vorontsov house. Dr. Gromov waited outside, pacing, while inside the photographer worked with chemicals whose acrid smell seeped beneath the door. It was past midnight when Sokolov finally emerged, carrying a single glass plate negative with extreme care. I've developed 4 images, he said, his voice strange and tight. 3 are perfectly normal portraits of the child. Standard composition, correct exposure, nothing unusual. And the 4th? Sokolov held up the plate to the lamplight. Even in negative, Gromov could see that something was profoundly wrong with the image. Maria sat in the center of the frame, exactly as positioned, but she was not alone. Behind her, slightly out of focus but unmistakably present, stood the translucent figures of 5 people. An elderly woman in the dress style of the 1840s, a middle-aged man in a merchant's coat, a young woman holding an infant, a boy of perhaps 10 years, a priest in Orthodox vestments. They were not solid. You could see through them to the wallpaper and furniture beyond. But they were undeniably there, captured by the camera's eye, and they were all looking directly at the lens, looking at whoever would eventually view this photograph. Looking, Gromov realized with a chill, at him. "This is impossible," Sokolov whispered. "I photographed an empty room except for the child. I saw nothing. Nothing was there." "The camera saw differently," Gromov said quietly. "Cameras don't see. They record light. They capture only what physically exists in front of the lens. Perhaps what physically exists is more than what we can see." Sokolov set the plate down with trembling hands. During the exposure, the child spoke. She described each of these people, their names, how they died, when. She told me that the woman holding the infant was Alexandra Ivanovna Petrova, who died of childbed fever in 1853, that the priest was Father Grigory, who died of a stroke in his church in 1849. She knew details about each of them that she couldn't possibly know. He looked up at Gromov. "I photographed ghosts, doctor. I photographed the dead." "You photographed what Maria sees every moment of every day," Gromov corrected gently. "What she's been trying to tell us since she returned. They're real. They're here. They've always been here. She's just the only one who can see them. Or the only one the camera can see them through," Sokolov added thoughtfully. He picked up the plate again, studying it with professional fascination, overcoming his fear. The camera captured them because it was photographing Maria, and Maria is somehow acting as a bridge, a medium through which the dead become visible. "Can you make prints?" Gromov asked. "We'll need documentation, evidence." "I can make prints, but Dr." Sokolov hesitated. "What will you do with this evidence? Who will believe it?" Before Gromov could answer, a scream erupted from upstairs. They found Maria in her bedroom, pressed against the wall, staring in horror at her own mirror. "There are too many," she gasped. "They keep coming, more and more. They heard about me. Somehow they know I can see them, hear them, remember them. They're coming from everywhere." Gromov looked at the mirror. He saw only Maria's reflection, pale, terrified, childlike. But Maria was seeing something else entirely. "How many?" he asked carefully. "I don't know. 20, 30. They're crowding into the room, pushing against each other, all trying to reach me at once, all begging me to remember, to write down their names, to prove they existed." Tears streamed down her face. I can't remember all of them. There are too many. I'm forgetting the earlier ones. When I remember new deaths, the old ones start to fade. It's like I only have room for so many at once, and they're fighting over who gets to be remembered." Elizaveta tried to embrace her daughter, but Maria pulled away. "Don't touch me, Mama. They might touch you through me. They're so desperate, so cold. I can feel them pressing against me, trying to use my body to be real again." Sokolov had followed them upstairs. Now he stepped forward. "Maria, may I photograph you again? Here, with the mirror?" The child looked at him with those ancient, exhausted eyes. "You want to see them?" "I want to document them, to prove you're not mad, that what you see is real." Maria considered this, then nodded slowly. She moved away from the wall and stood before the mirror, composing herself with visible effort. Sokolov worked quickly, setting up his portable camera, adjusting the exposure for the dim lamplight. "This will take 2 minutes," he warned. You must remain absolutely still." "They'll stay still too," Maria said. "They want to be seen. They've been waiting so long to be seen." The exposure began. For 2 minutes, Maria stood motionless before her mirror. Her hands hung at her sides. Her face remained blank, expressionless. But in her eyes, those two old, too knowing eyes, Gromov saw something that made his blood run cold. Not fear, not pain, but resignation. The look of someone who has accepted an unbearable burden because there is no one else to carry it. When Sokolov completed the exposure and removed the plate, his hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped it. "Did you see?" Maria asked quietly. "See what?" "In the mirror, for just a moment at the end. I thought perhaps you saw them too." Sokolov shook his head. "I saw only you, child. That's because you were looking with your eyes. The camera sees differently. You'll understand when you develop the plate." The photograph that Sokolov developed that night would become the most controversial piece of evidence in the entire Vorontsov case. In the image, Maria stood before her mirror as she had in life, a small, thin child in a white nightgown, but in the mirror's reflection, clearly visible behind her, were the faces and partial figures of at least 17 different people. Some were in sharp focus, others were blurred, as if they had been moving during the exposure. All of them stared out from the mirror with expressions ranging from desperate pleading to quiet sorrow to something that looked almost like gratitude. But the most disturbing element of the photograph was this. While Maria faced the camera in the actual room, her reflection in the mirror was turned around, facing the crowd of dead. And the reflected Maria's hands were raised, as if trying to hold back a tide, or embracing an overwhelming burden, or both at once. "It's as if there are two Marias," Sokolov observed, studying the wet print. "The living child facing our world, and the reflected child facing the world of the dead, and both are real." Gromov felt the terrible weight of that observation. She exists in both worlds simultaneously. She's become a door, a bridge, something that allows them to reach across. "But why her?" Elizaveta asked, her voice breaking. "Why my daughter? What did she do to deserve this?" "She died," Gromov said quietly. "For 4 minutes she was fully dead, and when she came back, she brought something with her. Or perhaps she left something behind, a part of herself that still exists on the other side, calling to them, giving them a way to be seen." He looked at Maria, who had fallen asleep in her mother's arms, exhausted by the photographing. "The question isn't why her. The question is, how do we help her?" Over the next 3 weeks, Sokolov took 17 more photographs of Maria in various settings and conditions. Each one captured the dead. In some images, they were distant and faint, barely visible shadows. In others, they pressed close, their faces near enough to show individual features. All bore the same desperate expression: the need to be seen, to be remembered, to be proven real. Sokolov documented everything with scientific precision. He varied the exposure times, changed the lighting conditions, used different types of photographic plates. The results were consistent. Whenever Maria was in the frame, the dead appeared. "I photographed her with her family," Sokolov told Gromov on July 24th, showing him a group portrait of the Vorontsovs. "Look carefully at the background." Behind the living family, Dmitri, Elizaveta, Maria, and her 3 siblings, stood a crowd of perhaps 30 translucent figures. They filled the parlor, overlapping each other, some clearer than others, all watching the camera with those pleading eyes. "They're getting bolder," Gromov observed, "more visible, as if Maria's ability to see them is strengthening." "Or as if more of them are finding her," Sokolov corrected. "I counted the figures in each photograph. The number increases with each session. It's as if word is spreading through whatever realm they inhabit. The dead are learning that there's a child who can see them, and they're coming to her. That night, Maria had the worst episode yet. She woke screaming at 2 a.m., not in pain but in overwhelm. "They're all talking at once," she cried. "I can't understand them. They're all trying to tell me their stories at the same time. Their names, their deaths, their families. It's too much, it's too many. I can't hold all of them." Dr. Gromov gave her a sedative, but it took nearly an hour to calm her. When she finally quieted, she looked up at him with eyes that seemed 1,000 years old. "Doctor, am I going mad, or is the world mad and I'm the only one who sees it truly?" "Neither," Gromov said, though he wasn't certain. "You see something real that others cannot. That doesn't make you mad. It makes you extraordinary. I don't want to be extraordinary. I want to be ordinary. I want to play with dolls and learn piano and not know the names of 47 dead people. I want to be 7 years old." "I know. Will it ever stop? Will they ever leave me alone?" Gromov had no answer, because the truth, as revealed in Sokolov's photographs, was that the dead weren't leaving. They were gathering, collecting around Maria like moths to a flame, and there was no indication they would ever stop coming. From Alexander Sokolov's photographic journal, July 30th, 1887. "I came to Ryazan as a skeptic and a scientist, believing that photography could reveal truth through objective documentation. I leave as something else entirely, a witness to a phenomenon that challenges everything I thought I knew about the boundaries between life and death. I have photographed Maria Vorontsova 23 times. In every single image, the dead appear. They are not tricks of light, not double exposures, not chemical accidents. They are real, recorded on glass plates that cannot lie. But my most disturbing discovery is this: the dead in these photographs are not random. After careful analysis and comparison with Dr. Gromov's records of Maria's visions, I've determined that they all died within a specific time frame, 1837 to 1857, spanning exactly 20 years, and all died between January and September. There is a pattern here, a reason why these particular dead can reach Maria and others cannot. But what that reason is, I cannot fathom. Tonight I developed the final photograph, a portrait of Maria alone in her room. Behind her, the crowd has grown to more than 50 visible figures. They fill the entire frame, layer upon layer of translucent faces and bodies, all reaching toward her. And Maria, in the center of this supernatural congregation, looks so very small, so very fragile, so very much like she's drowning in an ocean of the forgotten dead. I do not know how this story ends, but I fear for this child. The camera has shown me what she bears, and it is a weight no mortal, let alone a 7-year-old girl, should have to carry. Chapter 4. The Interrogation of the Dead Ryazan, Russian Empire, August to September 1887. Colonel Pavel Nikolaevich Vyazemsky of the 3rd Section, the Tsar's secret police, arrived in Ryazan on August 12, 1887, accompanied by 2 junior officers and a stenographer. He was 48 years old, tall and gray-bearded, with the kind of face that revealed nothing and eyes that missed even less. Dr. Gromov received the official notice the previous evening. You are commanded to make yourself and all documentation regarding the patient Maria Dmitrievna Vorontsova available for imperial inspection. Cooperation is mandatory. Silence is expected. The meeting took place in the Vorontsov parlor, with Dmitri and Elizaveta seated together on the sofa, Gromov in a chair to their left, and Colonel Vyazemsky standing by the window, reading through Gromov's medical journals with methodical precision. "Remarkable," Vyazemsky said after 20 minutes of silence. "Absolutely remarkable. The child dies for 4 minutes, returns, and suddenly possesses detailed knowledge of deaths that occurred decades before her birth. And you, Dr. Gromov, have verified, he consulted a page, 53 separate accounts against historical records, all accurate. 57 now, Gromov corrected quietly. 4 more cases were confirmed last week. Vyazemsky looked up sharply. The number continues to increase? Daily. The colonel set down the journal and crossed to stand directly before Dmitri. And the photographs. Mr. Sokolov's photographs. I've seen copies. They show apparitions, figures. What do you call them? The dead, Dmitri said, his voice carefully neutral. My daughter calls them the dead who want to be remembered. How convenient. Vyazemsky's tone dripped skepticism. A child who can speak with the dead. Tell me, Dmitri Alexeyevich, what do you hope to gain from this elaborate deception? Fame, money. Perhaps you've been approached by spiritualists willing to pay handsomely for such a talented actress. Elizaveta stood abruptly. My daughter is not an actress. She's dying. She's being crushed under the weight of something she never asked for. If you can't help her, then leave us alone. I didn't say I couldn't help. Vyazemsky's expression shifted slightly, not quite sympathy, but something close to professional interest. I said I'm skeptical. There's a difference. The third section deals in facts, not phantoms, but... He gestured to the journals. These facts are compelling, so I propose a test. What kind of test? Gromov asked warily. Vyazemsky reached into his coat and withdrew a photograph, a formal portrait of a middle-aged man in military uniform, taken perhaps a decade earlier. Colonel Andrei Sergeyevich Volkov, decorated veteran, administrator in the Ministry of War, died 6 weeks ago under suspicious circumstances. Heart failure, the doctors said. But certain documents have gone missing. Documents of considerable importance to state security. He laid the photograph on the table. If your patient truly communes with the dead, let her commune with Colonel Volkov. Let her tell me how he died, and more importantly, let her tell me where he hid those documents before his death. The room fell silent. You want to use my daughter as a spy, Dmitri said slowly, as an interrogator of corpses. I want to determine if her abilities are genuine, and if they are, Vyazemsky's eyes glittered, then yes, the Empire would have considerable use for such a gift. Imagine, no secret could remain buried, no traitor could die without revealing his conspirators, no foreign agent could take his intelligence to the grave. The strategic value would be incalculable. Absolutely not, Elizaveta's voice shook. My daughter is not a tool for your intrigues. Your daughter is a subject of the Russian Empire. Her gifts, if genuine, belong to the Tsar. Refusal to cooperate would be unwise. Gromov stood. Colonel, with all respect, Maria is gravely ill. Each death she remembers physically manifests in her body. She experiences their pain, their terror, their final moments. If she were to attempt contact with a recently deceased individual, someone whose death is fresh, it could kill her. Then she dies in service to the Empire. Some would call that honorable. The casual cruelty of the statement hung in the air like smoke. Dmitri's hands clenched into fists. You'll have to arrest me first, because I will not allow... Papa? Maria's voice came from the doorway. She stood there in her nightgown, pale as porcelain, her eyes fixed on the photograph lying on the table. I can hear him, Colonel Volkov. He's standing right behind the man with the gray beard. Everyone turned to look at her. Vyazemsky's eyes narrowed. You can see him? Now? Maria nodded slowly. He's very agitated. He keeps trying to speak, but the words come out wrong, like he's underwater. He's pointing at something. She tilted her head, following something invisible across the room. He's pointing at the photograph, at himself. He wants me to know something. What does he want you to know? Vyazemsky's voice had gone very quiet. He didn't hide the documents. Someone took them after he died. Someone who came to his house pretending to pay respects. A man with, she paused, concentrating, a scar on his left hand, 3 fingers missing. He wore a jeweled ring on his right hand, a ruby set in gold. Vyazemsky's face went completely white. His hand moved reflexively to his coat, as if reaching for a weapon. "Captain Orlov," he said to one of the junior officers, "return to Moscow immediately. Arrest Colonel Berezhkov. The charge is treason. He wears a ruby ring and lost 3 fingers in the Crimean War." The captain saluted and left at a run. Vyazemsky turned back to Maria, and now his expression held not skepticism, but something far more dangerous: belief. "What else can you tell me about Colonel Volkov's death?" "No," Gromov stepped between them. "This ends now. Maria, go back to your room." But Maria didn't move. She was staring past Vyazemsky, her eyes tracking something moving through the parlor. "He's very insistent. He says he didn't die of heart failure. He was poisoned. Arsenic in his evening tea. He felt it happening but couldn't call for help. His servants found him the next morning, but he knew who did it. He knew—" She swayed suddenly, grabbing the doorframe for support. "Maria!" Elizaveta rushed to her daughter, but Maria pushed her away. "I have to finish. He's been waiting to tell someone. He says the poison was purchased from an apothecary on—" She gasped, pressing her hand to her chest. "On Nikolskaya Street. The man who bought it gave a false name, but the apothecary remembers him. Red hair, nervous manner. He'll remember." Then Maria collapsed. She woke 3 hours later in her bed, with Dr. Gromov taking her pulse and her mother sitting vigil beside her. "What happened?" Maria's voice was barely a whisper. "You experienced Colonel Volkov's death," Gromov said gently, "just as you've experienced the others. Your heart rate became erratic. You showed symptoms of poisoning, excessive salivation, abdominal pain, difficulty breathing, but it passed after 15 minutes. Did I help him? Did I tell them what he wanted them to know?" "Yes, you helped him." Maria smiled weakly. "Good. He was so desperate, so angry about dying with the truth untold. He can rest now." "Maria," Gromov said carefully, "the colonel from the 3rd section. He wants to use you, to have you commune with other recently dead, to extract their secrets. Your father and I won't allow it. But I need you to understand, this man has considerable power. He can make things very difficult for your family if we refuse." "I know." Maria closed her eyes. "Colonel Volkov told me. He says the gray-bearded man has done terrible things, that he'll do terrible things to get what he wants, that I should run far away before he makes me into a weapon." "We could leave," Elizaveta said suddenly. "Tonight. Go to your brother's estate in Tula, or even farther, Kiev, Odessa, somewhere the 3rd section won't find us." Dmitri shook his head. "You can't hide from the 3rd section. They have agents everywhere, and if we run, we'll only confirm that Maria's abilities are valuable enough to flee with. No, we stay. We cooperate minimally. We buy time." "Time for what?" Elizaveta demanded. "For her to get better, to learn to control this, to—" "Mama," Maria interrupted quietly, "I'm not going to get better." The room fell silent. "What do you mean?" Elizaveta's voice broke. "I'm dying, slowly. Every death I remember takes a piece of me. Every time I experience their final moments, I die a little bit too. I can feel it. I'm fading." "No." Elizaveta grabbed her daughter's hand. "No, we'll find a way to stop it, to make them leave you alone. Dr. Gromov will find a cure, or we'll take you to doctors in Moscow, or—" "There is no cure for being a door between worlds, Mama. I opened it when I died and came back, and now I can't close it. The dead will keep coming until—" She paused. "Until there's nothing left of me to come to." Gromov felt his heart break, because he knew she was right. He'd been documenting her decline for months. The weight loss, the physical toll of each manifestation, the way she seemed to be slowly vanishing, becoming more transparent, more ghost-like herself. "How long?" he asked quietly. Maria looked at him with those ancient eyes. "I don't know. Weeks, months. They're coming faster now, more of them every day. Sometimes I can hear dozens at once, all clamoring to be remembered. Soon I won't be able to distinguish my own thoughts from theirs. Soon I'll forget which memories are mine and which belong to the dead." She turned to look at her mother. "But before that happens, I want to help as many of them as I can. If Colonel Vyazemsky can find the people who hurt Colonel Volkov, then the colonel's death will mean something. If I can give the forgotten dead their voices back, then maybe this gift, this curse, will have been worth it." "Maria," Elizaveta began, "I'm 7 years old, Mama. I should be playing with dolls. But instead I'm dying, and I've accepted that. So let me choose how I spend the time I have left. Let me help them, please." No one spoke. Because what could you say to a 7-year-old child who had just accepted her own death with more grace than most adults could muster? Over the next 3 weeks, Colonel Vyazemsky returned 5 more times, each time bringing photographs or personal effects of recently deceased individuals connected to matters of state security. Maria communed with them all. A diplomat who died in suspicious circumstances, Maria revealed he'd been murdered by his own secretary, who was a foreign agent. Investigation proved her correct. A merchant accused of embezzlement who died before trial. Maria described where he'd hidden the stolen money. The cash was found exactly where she said. A naval officer who drowned, Maria revealed it was suicide, not accident, and explained why. His family, granted pension based on accidental death, were spared the shame and financial ruin of a suicide verdict. Each session left Maria weaker. Each communion with the recently dead drained more of her life force. But she continued because, as she told Dr. Gromov, "At least these deaths have purpose. At least I'm doing something useful with this." Vyazemsky, for his part, treated her with a mixture of professional respect and clinical detachment. He recorded every session. He cross-referenced every claim. And he became absolutely convinced that Maria Vorontsova represented the most valuable intelligence asset the Russian Empire had ever possessed. "The child must be moved to St. Petersburg," he told Dmitri on September 15th. "The Tsar himself has heard of her abilities. He wishes her to be placed under the protection and supervision of the 3rd section. A comfortable apartment will be provided. Physicians will attend her constantly. Her family may visit weekly." "No," Dmitri said flatly. "My daughter stays with her family." "That is not a request. And my refusal is not a negotiation. You'll have to drag her from this house in chains, and I'll make sure every newspaper in Moscow knows about it." Vyazemsky's eyes went cold. "You're making a dangerous enemy, Dmitri Alexeyevich. You're making a protective father into a desperate one. There's a difference." The colonel left without another word. But Dr. Gromov, watching from the window as the carriage departed, knew this was far from over. From Dr. Gromov's journal, September 20th, 1887. Maria's condition deteriorates daily. She weighs barely 40 pounds. She sleeps rarely, and when she does, she wakes screaming from nightmares filled with other people's deaths. She eats almost nothing. Her skin has become so pale it's nearly translucent. You can see the blue veins beneath, a network of rivers carrying what little life remains through her failing body. But worst of all is the look in her eyes, that terrible ancient exhaustion. She looks like someone who has lived 1,000 years and is ready to rest. Today she told me she's begun to forget her own name. "Sometimes," she said, "I don't remember if I'm Maria or Ekaterina or Anna or one of the others. Their memories are becoming my memories. Their deaths are becoming my death. Soon there won't be enough of me left to remember who I was before all this began. I have failed this child. I documented her case with scientific precision. I verified her claims. I proved the reality of her abilities, and in doing so, I helped transform her into a tool, a resource to be exploited. Colonel Vyazemsky will return. He will bring imperial orders. He will take Maria to St. Petersburg, whether her family consents or not. And in that city of secrets and spies, she will be used until there is nothing left of her to use. Unless we do something drastic. I have been communicating in secret with a colleague in Germany, Dr. Wilhelm Fischer at the University of Heidelberg. He specializes in disorders of consciousness and has expressed interest in Maria's case. More importantly, Germany is beyond the reach of the third section. If the Vorontsova family were to travel to Germany for medical consultation, they might choose not to return. They might seek asylum. They might disappear into the crowds of Berlin or Vienna or anywhere the Russian Empire cannot easily reach them. It is a desperate plan. It may fail. But I can see no other way to save this child from becoming a weapon in the hands of men who view her as nothing more than a useful tool. Tomorrow I will propose it to Dmitri. Tomorrow we will decide if we are willing to commit what the Empire will certainly consider treason. But tonight I sit by Maria's bedside and watch her sleep fitfully, muttering names of the dead in her dreams. And I know with absolute certainty that if we do nothing, this child will be dead within 6 months. So yes, tomorrow we plan her escape. Tomorrow we become traitors in the name of saving one small girl who never asked to be extraordinary. Chapter 5. The Last Memory Ryazan, Russian Empire. October 23, 1887. Maria Dmitrievna Vorontsova died on October 23, 1887 at 4:17 in the afternoon. She was 7 years and 8 months old. But before we reach that ending, we must understand the final week of her extraordinary and terrible life. October 16, 1887. Dr. Gromov's plan to smuggle the Vorontsov family to Germany never came to fruition. Not because Colonel Vyazemsky discovered it, he didn't. Not because Dmitri refused, he had agreed. But because Maria herself said no. I can't leave, she told them on the night of October 16th, when the plan was finally presented to her. They'll follow me. The dead will follow wherever I go. And when I die, whether in Ryazan or Berlin or anywhere else, I need to be buried here, with them, where they can find me. What do you mean, where they can find you? Elizaveta's voice shook. Maria looked at her mother with those infinitely weary eyes. I'm going to become one of them, Mama. When I die, I'll join the forgotten dead. And maybe if I'm with them, I can help them from the other side. Maybe I can be their voice even after I'm gone. You're not going to die, Elizaveta insisted, though everyone in the room knew she was lying to herself. Mama, I'm already dead. I've been dying since March. This, she gestured to her frail body, is just my body catching up to what my soul already knows. That night, Maria made a request that would become the most important documentation of her case. Dr. Gromov, I want you to write down all their names, everyone I've remembered. I'm starting to forget them, and I don't want them to be forgotten again. When I'm gone, someone needs to remember that they existed. And so Dr. Gromov began what he would later call Maria's Testament, a complete list of every death she had described, with all the details she could recall. They worked for 7 hours that night, with Maria lying in bed and speaking in a voice that grew progressively weaker, while Gromov's pen scratched across page after page. Ekaterina Andreevna Dmitrieva died January 17, 1843, childbed fever. Pyotr Ivanovich Sokolov died August 3, 1848, drowned in the Oka River. Anna Petrovna Volkova died June 12, 1852, tuberculosis. 73 names in total, 73 forgotten souls given voice one final time through the lips of a dying child. When they finished, just before dawn, Maria looked at the stack of papers and smiled. The first genuine smile Gromov had seen on her face in months. "Thank you," she whispered. "Now when I forget them, they'll still exist. In your words, in your records. They won't be erased." October 18th, 1887. Maria stopped eating entirely. Her body, already skeletal, seemed to be consuming itself. Dr. Gromov could do nothing except administer morphine to ease what pain he could. But the morphine had a strange effect. It dulled Maria's physical pain but seemed to strengthen her connection to the dead. She began speaking almost constantly in voices that weren't her own. Old voices, young voices, male and female, peasant dialects and noble accents, all flowing through her like water through a broken dam. Father Vasily came to give her last rites, but when he began the prayers, Maria interrupted him. "Father, they want you to know they forgive you." The priest paused. "Who, child?" "The 3 people you failed. The woman who came to you for help when her husband beat her. You told her to be more obedient and she died 2 weeks later. The young man who confessed his loss of faith. You reported him to the authorities and he was exiled to Siberia. The child you turned away from the church door because he was illegitimate. He froze to death that night." Father Vasily's face went gray as ash. How? Those were confessional secrets. No one knew. They know. The dead know everything. They've been watching you carry that guilt for years, and they want you to know they forgive you, because they understand now. They see why you did what you did. Fear, doctrine, the belief that you were serving God. They forgive you, Father, so forgive yourself. The priest wept, falling to his knees beside her bed, and Maria, with the last of her strength, placed her small hand on his head in a gesture of benediction that was both heartbreaking and somehow, impossibly, holy. October 20th, 1887, Colonel Vyazemsky arrived with an imperial order demanding Maria's immediate transfer to St. Petersburg. Dr. Gromov, standing at the door of the Vorontsova house, handed him a single sheet of paper. It was a death certificate not yet filled out, but with a date, October 23rd, 1887. "She has 3 days left," Gromov said quietly. "Perhaps 4. You can take her to St. Petersburg if you wish, but she will die during the journey, and when she dies, whatever connection she has to the dead will die with her. Is that what the Tsar wants? To let this extraordinary gift expire in the back of a carriage, alone and terrified? How do you know she'll die on the 23rd? She told me, and she's never been wrong about a death yet." Vyazemsky stared at the certificate for a long moment. Then he looked past Gromov to the house where Maria lay dying. "Let me speak with her one last time." Gromov led him to Maria's room. The child lay in bed, so thin she barely made an impression beneath the covers, but her eyes were open and alert. "Colonel Vyazemsky," she said, her voice a whisper, "you've come to say goodbye." "I've come to ask a question." The colonel sat in the chair beside her bed, and for the first time, Gromov saw something almost like vulnerability in his face. "When you die, will you be able to continue helping from the other side?" "No, when I die, I'll become one of the forgotten, just like them, unless—" She paused, thinking, "Unless someone remembers me, unless someone writes down my story, then maybe I won't be forgotten. Maybe I'll exist in people's memories the way Ekaterina and Pyotr and Anna exist in mine." "I'll write your story," Vyazemsky said, surprising everyone in the room. "Not for the 3rd section, not for the Empire, for you, so you won't be forgotten." Maria smiled. "Thank you, Colonel, that's kind." "Before you go," Vyazemsky pulled out one final photograph. "My son, He died 8 years ago. He was 12. Scarlet fever. I never got to say goodbye. He died while I was on assignment in Warsaw. Is he? Maria's eyes focused on something invisible. Her expression softened. He's here. He says he knew you loved him. He says he understood you had to go. He wasn't angry. He was proud of you. He says, her voice caught. He says to tell his mama that he forgives her for crying so much. He wishes she would smile again. Vyazemsky, this man who had built his career on ruthlessness and secrets, broke down completely. Great heaving sobs shook his shoulders as he buried his face in his hands. He forgives you too, Maria whispered, for not being there. He says you're a good father even if you weren't there at the end. He says he loves you. When Vyazemsky finally composed himself and left, he spoke only to Dr. Gromov. Give her anything she wants, anything, and send me word when it's over. October 23rd, 1887, Maria woke at dawn on the last day of her life. She asked her mother to brush her hair one final time, to dress her in her Sunday best, the blue dress with white lace collar that she had worn on that terrible day in March when she first sat for Sokolov's photograph. I want to look nice, she explained. When I meet them, the ones I've been remembering, I want them to see I took them seriously, that I cared. The family gathered in her room. Dmitri, Elizaveta, her 3 siblings who had been kept mostly away during her illness. Gromov sat in his usual chair, his medical bag open but useless. Father Vasily stood by the window, prayer book in hand. At noon, Maria began speaking. They're all here, everyone I remembered, all 73. They've come to help me across, to thank me. They're not frightening anymore. They look peaceful, happy, like they've been waiting for permission to rest, and I gave it to them by remembering. She turned her head, as if following something moving through the room. Ekaterina is here. She's holding her daughter, the baby she never got to hold in life. She says thank you. She says because I remembered her, she got to meet her child on the other side. Tears streamed down Elizaveta's face. Pyotr is here with his son. Both of them drowned, but now they're together. He says drowning doesn't hurt anymore. Nothing hurts anymore. For 2 hours, Maria described the gathering of the dead, her final act of witness, her last gift of remembrance. And then, at 4:12 p.m., she looked directly at her mother. Mama, I need to tell you something, about me, about what happens after. What is it, my love? I'm going to come back. The room fell silent. Not right away, and not as Maria, but the door I opened, it doesn't close just because I die. In 50 years, maybe 100, there will be another child like me, someone who dies and comes back wrong, someone who can hear the forgotten dead. And when that happens, they'll need to know they're not alone. They'll need to know someone else walked this path before them. She paused, breathing shallowly. So I'm going to leave them a message, a memory. When they start hearing the dead, they'll hear me too. And I'll tell them, remember them, give them voice. It's hard and it hurts and it will destroy you, but it matters. They matter. Don't let them be forgotten. Maria's eyes began to close. Mama, I'm so tired. Can I sleep now? Yes, my darling, sleep. Will you remember me? All of you. Will you tell people about the girl who remembered the dead? We'll remember, Dmitri promised, his voice breaking. We'll always remember. Good, because if you remember me, then I remember them. And if they're remembered, they existed. And if they existed, they mattered. And if they mattered, she smiled one last time. Then maybe I did too. At 4:17 p.m., Maria Dmitrievna Vorontsova took her last breath. Unlike her first death, there was no dramatic resuscitation, no gasping return, This time the death was final and quiet, and in its way, merciful. But Dr. Gromov, checking her pulse and finding none, could have sworn he saw something, a brief flicker in the air around her body, like heat shimmer on a summer day. And for just a moment the room felt crowded, as if filled with invisible witnesses. Then the feeling passed, and she was simply gone. Epilogue, Moscow, 1937. Dr. Ivan Petrovich Gromov died in 1919, but before his death he sent his complete documentation of the Vorontsova case to the Imperial Academy of Sciences. The third section confiscated most of it, but copies survived, passed quietly through academic circles. In 1937, 50 years after Maria's death, a letter arrived at the Moscow Institute of Psychiatric Medicine. It was from a woman named Elena Petrova, a schoolteacher in a small town outside Stalingrad. My daughter Katya is 7 years old. 3 months ago, she nearly died from diphtheria. She was clinically dead for 6 minutes. When she revived, she began describing deaths of people she's never met, people who died between 1917 and 1937. She knows details no child could know. But what frightens me most is this. She says a girl visits her in her dreams, a girl named Maria who died a long time ago. This girl tells her not to be afraid, that she walked this path before, that it's hard and it hurts, but it matters. My daughter is dying, doctor, just as I believe this Maria died. She grows weaker every day, consumed by other people's deaths. Please, if you know anything about this case, if there's any treatment, any way to help her, I'm begging you. The letter was filed away, marked psychiatric delusion, and forgotten by official medicine. But those who knew the Vorontsova case understood. The door Maria had opened was still open, and it would remain open as long as there were forgotten dead who needed to be remembered. Author's note found in Dr. Gromov's final journal entry. I have spent 30 years documenting medical anomalies, but Maria Vorontsova's case stands alone. Not because it was the most scientifically inexplicable, though it was, but because it taught me something profound about what it means to be human. We fear death because we fear being forgotten. We build monuments and write our names in stone because we cannot bear the thought of vanishing without trace. We need to matter. We need to be remembered. Maria understood this. A 7-year-old child understood what philosophers and theologians spend lifetimes pondering, that to be remembered is to be saved from the ultimate death, erasure from existence. She sacrificed herself to give voice to the voiceless. She died so that 73 forgotten souls could be remembered, and in doing so, she became unforgettable herself. I do not know if what Maria experienced was supernatural or some unknown neurological phenomenon. I do not know if the dead she saw were real or elaborate constructions of a dying mind. But I know this. She believed they were real. She believed they mattered, and she gave her life to prove it. That, ultimately, is what makes us human. Not our ability to live, but our willingness to die for what we believe matters. Maria Vorontsova mattered. The 73 dead she remembered mattered. And anyone reading this account should know, when you die, you matter. Someone, somewhere, will remember. You will not be forgotten. Because a little girl with ancient eyes opened a door between worlds to make sure of it. Remember her. And in remembering her, remember all the forgotten dead. That was her final wish, and it is my duty as her physician and witness to ensure it is honored. Dr. Ivan Petrovich Gromov, Ryazan, November 1887. The End. The photographs taken by Alexander Sokolov in 1887, showing Maria Vorontsova surrounded by translucent figures, were confiscated by the third section and remain classified in Russian state archives to this day. Dr. Gromov's journals were partially published in 1923, then suppressed during Stalin's purges. Maria's grave in Ryazan's Orthodox cemetery was destroyed during World War II, but the story survived, passed between doctors, whispered among scholars, preserved in fragments of memory, because some stories, like some souls, refuse to be forgotten.